Okay, hey everybody. This is the Creative Finance and Subject to class for REI USA for Saturday, March the 6th. My name is William Tingle, and I will be sharing some information with you today on seller financing. What we're going to talk about today is seller financing and why it's the king of disposition. Some of you guys that were on our last episode, I talked a little bit about subject to, exactly what it is. And today we're going to talk about our favorite method of moving these properties, which is seller financing. So let me tell you a little bit about me if you weren't on the last episode. Guys, I worked in the restaurant industry for 20 years. I ordered a Carlton Sheets late night infomercial course in July of 1999 and bought my first investment property the next month. Why was I able to do that so quickly? Well, I took action, and that's what I find that a lot of investors don't do. They'll buy courses, they'll take trainings, but what's most important is taking action. And by taking action, I mean not just learning the material that's in the course, but also getting out there and talking to sellers, because if you're not talking to sellers, you're not going to buy houses. So I bought properties for that first year, quit my job, went full-time 1 year later, bought properties for about 10 years in the Macon, Georgia market, and sort of retired, semi-retired in 2010 and moved to Belize, got bored, and started buying property remotely a year or so later. And we've been buying properties remotely ever since. Now, I've bought about 600 properties over the last 20 years or so, and over 500 of those were actually sub-2 deals, and that is my specialty, is buying subject to. So we'll get started here today. After we're done here, if you guys have follow-up questions, we've got some totally free resources for you. Sub2forum.com, that is our free Facebook group. Go to that URL, join our Facebook group. We talk about subject to, seller financing, all things creative every single day. We've got a YouTube channel where we release episodes of our podcast, and also we answer questions on video and give tips. We release cold calling sessions that we've done with sellers, just all kind of training stuff. It's all free. You can listen to our podcast at podcast.sub2deals.com or find it on Apple Podcast. And then we also have our website at sub2deals.com. We'll take a break here every once in a while and answer a few questions and that sort of thing. So if you have any questions, just type them in the Q&A or the chat, or I'm still learning the Zoom webinar platform, so you guys bear with me just a little bit on that. But anyway, so we'll get on with it right now. So today's training is based on my experiences. I started investing in 1999, I actually bought my first investment property. So I've been doing this for about 21 years. Now, everybody's journey is going to be a little bit different. It's going to depend on where you are, what type of properties that you own. So it's super important that you learn and know your state laws regarding how to do these transactions. If you're in Texas, for example, where they give contract for deed the side-eye, you're not going to want to operate exactly like we do. Is there a way to do it? Sure, there is. You can use wraparound mortgages. You can get really complicated and sell beneficial interest in trust, and that's a topic for another day. But absolutely, there's a way to do this in every state in the United States. We're going to give you some examples today, some real deals, some real examples, and some real stories on how we found these deals, how we bought, how we sold. Just remember that successful businesses, and that's real estate included, are based on sound business practices. If you're out there trying to get over on your sellers or sell, and I've seen investors that would sell a $200,000 property for $300,000. They say, I can charge whatever I want because I'm offering creative financing. That's just not how we do things. Keep the numbers real, be fair with your buyers and sellers. You'll be very successful in this business. You'll last a long time. Ultimately, your success will depend on your knowledge, your goals, and how well you execute them. always be learning. I tell my students today, yeah, we're in probably the biggest seller's market I've seen in my 21 years of investing. There aren't many foreclosures out there. There aren't many FSBOs with super motivated people. Yes, you'll still be able to do deals. And, we see that happen all the time. But the more now is the time to be sharpening the saw, because when the foreclosures come back into the marketplace, when you'll find a lot more motivated sellers, you'll really be able to take advantage of those things. So always be learning. Make your goals realistic. Don't be afraid to stretch a little bit. Don't be afraid to adjust them if you've been a little bit adventurous in setting them. Remember that quality is much more important than quantity. I've seen some students that are so anxious to do a deal, they'll make someone else's problem their own, and you certainly don't want to do that. So make sure that the numbers make sense. We used to have a saying in the restaurant business: if there is a question, there is no question. And there's one thing that I'm going to be certain of when I buy a property, and that's that I will make money on it. So always remember certainty. It's the most important thing in any deal that you do. And your success in this business will take effort, tenacity, and education. So you got to stick with it. You got to do things on a very consistent basis if you want to be successful. So why is seller financing the king? And that's, of course, in my opinion. And that's number one is maximum profits. I can take a no equity $200,000 house. I can buy property from a seller today that's worth 200. They owe 195, and that's no equity, folks, all day long. I can take that property and make $50,000, $60,000 on it over the next 3 or 4 years. And we're going to show you how to do that later. But I wouldn't be able to do that. I wouldn't be able to buy that house and pay full price and retail it or wholesale it or do any of those things. But with seller financing, we can create profits out of literally thin air. There's minimum involvement when you seller finance. If I buy a house and choose to rent it out or even lease it with an option to purchase, I'm probably going to have issues with tenants from time to time. Junior flushes a hot wheel down the toilet. They're going to call me to come fix it. And that sort of thing. But I'll tell you, I've never bought a house with bank financing and had an issue and was able to call Bank of America and them come fix it. It just doesn't happen. And that's why we love seller financing. The people that we put in our properties own them. And if there's an issue, they take care of it. You can take on deals that would have never been profitable otherwise. As I said earlier, I can pay 100% and even more than that. And we've done that on several occasions. We bought, for example, a $200,000 property for $210,000 and still made money on it. And you could never do that most of the other ways that you do real estate. There are 3 profit centers. You've got the front end profit. Again, let's take the $200,000 house where the seller owes $195,000. I can probably sell that property with seller financing for $210,000 or $215,000, just top market value. I can collect $20,000 from my buyer, and that's my front end profit. I'll make cash flow every month, and then I'll have a profit. I'll get a check on the back end. So there are 3 profit centers. I get the benefits of wholesaling and long-term cash flow. Remember that down payment? That's just like wholesaling a deal. You know how you buy a house for $60,000 that's worth $150,000 and you wholesale it for $10,000 or $15,000 profit to a rehabber. Well, I get the benefit of that type of transaction with seller financing. I also get long-term benefits of cash flow. You know, our typical cash flow deal on a seller finance house right now is about $400, and that's what we're looking for, between no less than $300 and as close to $500 as we can possibly get. So be the bank instead of the landlord. The bank, tenants don't call the bank when there's a problem. They take care of things themselves. They put more money down. There's just so many advantages that way. One of the biggest problems that I find with teaching students is knowing enough to consistently produce a solid income and having those systems and processes in place to allow that to happen is the biggest obstacle I see to becoming a full-time successful investor. Profits and not having systems in place make income hit and miss. You can't predict a monthly income on a regular basis. And that's one of the biggest obstacles I see. For the first probably 12 years or so that I was an investor, I was a transaction engineer. I did whatever came along. If I marketed, I had inbound and outbound marketing. I had a lot of marketing out there to generate phone calls, and that's what they call inbound marketing. And whether that was bandit signs, or it was magnetics on the car, or it was ads in the freebie papers, or Facebook wasn't so big then, so we didn't have Facebook Marketplace. But I had a lot of things out there to generate phone calls. I would field the phone calls and then make a deal out of whatever came along. But about 12 years in, I decided that we were going to make some changes. And those changes, actually, what the change was we focused entirely on taking over payments on debt, and that was subject to, and exiting with seller financing. And doing that, we were able to create a consistent routine. You can call it a one-trick pony if you want, but it worked very well. Buy a house, sell it with seller financing. And I actually created a program at that time that I call 12 Months to Freedom. We'll talk about that on a future episode. But that produced a consistent monthly income with very few moving parts. And that's really what we're focusing on talking about today. So we're going to talk about subject to for just a few minutes to just give you an idea about what starts the process for us with seller financing. What I discovered early in my investing was that even if you had good credit and some money for down payments, there were really limits to the number of deals that a bank would do with you. At a certain point, they felt like you had too much what they call exposure, which in basic terms just means you owe them a lot of money, and they're not real comfortable with that. So what I found was that, if you had a good credit score, 750 or up, and like I said, you had a good history, credit history, you had cash to put down on some properties, 10 or 15 was probably where they were going to limit you. And even if I could get a $400 a month cash flow out of 10 to 15 properties, that max was going to let me have about a $6,000 a month income before expenses. And that just wasn't going to take me where I wanted to be. So we had to find some other ways to acquire properties. I tried lease and options, sandwich lease and options, didn't like that. There were too many people involved in the transaction. I had to deal with my seller all the time, my tenant all the time. I even had occasions where sellers and buyers would go around me to work together to make a deal that was better for both of them. Just didn't seem like a good fit for us. So about that time, I discovered buying subject to, and I call subject to the American Express of real estate investing, because when you buy a property subject to, you're purchasing it subject to the existing financing. This means you're just going to take over payments on any financing that's already there. The owner deeds you the property, you take the payment book, you start making the payments just as the former owner did. Now, you own the property. It's yours to do as you please with, but the seller still owns the loan. They still remain responsible for that. And the really cool thing about it is you can buy absolutely as many of these as you want. You're not going to formally assume them. No banks have to approve anything. You're just going to take over the payments and take ownership of the property. So what are the advantages of buying this way? Well, number one, there are no banks needed. You don't have to get any bank approval. You get low or no closing costs. We close a typical sub deal right now with a notary, and we get it all done for about $200 or less. You can close super fast. There's no delays, since you don't have to close with a title company or an attorney. If you have experience, we've literally been able to close these in less than 24 hours. It doesn't show up on your credit report. If you have good credit now, having a ton of loans out there is not going to impact your credit report. So if they're sub 2, they're not showing up. Good credit isn't needed to buy these properties. Your sellers don't care what your credit score is. Low homeowner interest rates. This is a super big advantage. As an investor with great credit, I'm not going to get the type of interest rate that Joe homeowner will. We see loans out there under 3% now. And as an investor with an 800 credit score, you won't get those interest rates on long-term fixed rate financing. It just doesn't happen. So your cash flow, the overall profit that you'll make is much greater. Owning the property with long-term financing means your exit possibilities are endless. So that's a really, really strong reason to use sub 2. So let's talk about marketing to sellers most likely to sell sub 2. Our favorite prospects are MLS listings at least 90 days old. Pre-foreclosures, of course, there certainly aren't as many of those today, but that's still a big target for us. Zillow, Craigslist, and any FSBO sellers, and referrals from agents, mortgage brokers, and mortgage field inspectors. Here's the best tip that you'll get today: mortgage field inspectors. Now, if you're not familiar with those guys, they're the people that go out for the mortgage companies when people are late on their payments, and they knock on doors and they leave door hangers and they drive by and take pictures. And if they find a vacant property, someone that's not making payments, maybe they're a couple of payments behind, and they've already moved out, they'll sticker that property. Now, if you can develop relationships with a few of these people in your area that you operate in, whether that's local or remote, they can just give you a call or send you a text and just tell you, hey, we just stickered 123 Oak Street. The people just moved out that were here last month and now they're gone. You can work on skip tracing the owner of that house and have notification way before foreclosure's filed and before anything's probably recorded anywhere, unless you buy a 30, 60, 90-day late list from list services. So mortgage field inspectors, they're excellent for doing that. They can also do little jobs for you. But, like I said, that's a topic for another day. But get to know some of these guys. They're used to working, for $5 a stop on these mortgage field inspections. And if you can pay them a little something for sending you leads like that, they're a really good resource. So consistent marketing is going to be an important part of your success. And you need to have at least 10 ways for sellers to contact you going at all times. We've done most all of these things here, where from business cards to promotional items to bandit signs to ads in newspapers. But you need to always have multiple streams of contact because, if you're just doing one thing, if you're just doing flyers, you're not going to generate enough leads to build any kind of successful business. But if you got magnetics on your car, you're doing bandit signs, you leave business cards everywhere, you always wear a shirt that says "I buy houses," you're advertising in the yellow pages or with door hangers or radio. If you've got multiple ways going and you just get just a few leads a month from each one, you'll be able to build a scalable business. Having multiple advertising campaigns going all the time will ensure that steady flow of calls. Most investors will need to spend money on marketing, and it doesn't matter what your budget is. If you've got a small one or a large budget, just plan according to your finances. We did a Facebook Live with Charles Blair Thursday, where he talked about a $300 a month marketing budget, which is super low, and how you can not only market, but you can also have follow-up campaigns for all of your leads that didn't work out. So that's something really important that you want to do. When you see signs like this, listen, these things are working because these guys wouldn't be doing them. And when you multiple, this was a common thing that I used to see in Macon when I ran the REI there. I taught my guys to use bandit signs, and they did, obviously, and they all got deals and they all worked out. So if you don't like the old school stuff, or you hear it doesn't work, you can buy a bandit sign for under $1. That's cheap marketing. And depending on where you put them, they'll stay out for a really long time. So some common marketing mistakes: not being consistent in your marketing, only using one method. Like I said earlier, you've got to do more than one thing. Mishandling your leads. You need to be able to make the most of any lead that comes to you. And if you're not, for example, I was not a mobile home guy. I've never bought mobile homes. I don't like them. I know a ton of investors who do, and they make good money with them. It was just something that didn't interest me. But I had people I could pass those leads off to. So if you don't buy in the rental neighborhoods, you need to know some landlords that do. And lastly, a desire for complete automation. Hey, we're in a people business, and you're going to need to talk to people from time to time. And everything can't be 100% automated. You're going to have to deal with people. talking to them, whether it's meeting with them or doing whatever, or you've got to have somebody in your organization that does. So don't think everything can be push button, touch tone, whatever from start to finish. Like I tell my students, it's not so much about the house, it's about the guy in the house. And at some point, somebody's going to have to talk to them and deal with them, whether that's you. If you're not good at it, you may want to hire an acquisitions guy or gal or something along those lines. So marketing for buyers, hey, it's often overlooked, but it's just as important as marketing for sellers. And the reason for this is when you buy a property, your objective is to fill it as quickly as possible, because vacancy is the enemy. Vacancy is what costs you money once you pull the trigger to buy that house. So when you get a house under contract, we put a sign in the yard immediately, and that's a contract stipulation. If your contract to buy doesn't have a stipulation in there where you can get a sign in that yard immediately, you need to add it. You need to be able to show the property immediately, and that also needs to be in your contract. You need to provide some means for buyers to call and find out what you've got 24/7. You can use Ring Central with multiple mailboxes. You can use a machine if you're super old school. But there are a ton of ways online today that you can provide a buyer info line if you've got multiple properties, if you're buying a lot of stuff in your area, that they can call in and find out what's available, the address, the amenities of the property. Limit your showings, especially until the house is vacant. We're in COVID right now, so that's super important right now. But even normally, you don't want to have somebody running out there to show your house numerous times. We would typically have 2 showings a week on any house that we had. Anyone that called that was interested, we would say, hey, we're showing it Saturday morning, or we're showing it Tuesday evening. Which would you prefer? Pre-qualify your buyers when they call you, because everybody's not going to have the down payment that you want or be able to afford the monthly payment that the house needs. And there's no sense in dealing with people who aren't going to be able to buy. Agents do this all the time. If you call a real estate agent and you say, I'm in the market for a house, the first thing they're going to want to do is pre-qualify you. So just take a page from their book. They don't want to waste their time, and you don't want to waste yours. My advice is to have a website to constantly collect buyer information. We use, in every market that we're in, we use a 1-page landing page that says, hey, like for example, in Colorado Springs market, it's buy that Springs house. And when they go there, it says, hey, we'll buy a house and sell it to you with seller financing. Tell us what you want. And they fill out about 10 questions. What neighborhood are you looking for? And they've got a drop down with all the neighborhoods surrounding Colorado Springs. How much do you have to put down? How much can you afford a month? And it asks a few other questions. Now, this buyer's website does a couple of things for us. Number one, it pre-qualifies the buyer. If they tell us they're looking for a house in the $300,000 price range and they've only got $5,000 to put down, we know it's probably not going to work out. But secondly, asking them what neighborhood they're looking in, collecting this information gives us secondary information. We know where most people are really looking right now, and that helps us focus our areas more on these certain neighborhoods. So it does a couple of things for you. It's a 1-page landing page, and I can show you guys an example of that if you'd like to see it, but they're super simple to use. That website will collect buyer's information. We run a generic ad in the newspaper to drive people to that website. Hey, you're looking for a house, got bad credit, we can finance you. And they'll send them to that website. They fill out the information. It tells us where people are looking for houses, and it helps qualify our buyers. You don't have to use the main newspaper. You can use the small penny pincher or thrifty nickel or whatever they call it in your particular city or town. Those are usually fairly inexpensive to advertise in. You can also use Facebook Marketplace, post it on your Facebook wall, just anywhere you can get that out there. Keep your website and your buyer's line current. and also do mailings to local apartments. We did that for a long time. If we bought a house in a certain neighborhood, there were 2 or 3 apartment complexes around there, we would send a very generic postcard to occupant, go in all the mailboxes, and it would say, hey, why rent an apartment when you can buy a house right down the street for probably not much more? And, to generate some interest there. So that's a good thing to do as well. Some more ways to make selling simple and easy. Use the systemized approach that we just talked about for your buyers. Attach flyer boxes to your sign poles, okay, that have flyer and information on the property. They should showcase anything about the property and also give information on other ones you may have available. Attach a page explaining how your program works so they understand it. Don't forget to tape a flyer inside the front window of your property, because a lot of times if someone goes by and the flyer box is empty, at least that way they can still get the information. Name your down payment and your payment information, but indicate flexibility. A lot of investors are afraid to put how much they want down or how much the payment is a month because they don't want to rule people out. But I want to rule the people out that can't pay. If I need 20,000 down on this house and the person looking at it's only got 5 and they can only afford 2/3 of what my payment expected is, I don't want to talk to them because they're just not the person for that particular house. So, okay, let's look at some of the real problems here with keeping houses occupied and the things that can happen. Your biggest enemy is vacancy. I try to tell my students that and look at it this way. If you buy a property and it's sitting empty, let's say that your payment is $1,200 a month. Well, gee, that's costing you about $40 a day, every single day that property sits empty. So it's super important to do all the things you can to get that thing filled quickly. So, $40 a day, you might as well take 2 20s out of your wallet and just burn them every single day. Bad tenants or buyers, you want to make sure that you're really selective in the people that you put in your house. If you do like rentals, you want to screen those people. Same thing with buyers. One of the main reasons that I like seller financing as opposed to renting is because a tenant may put a first month, last month in security up front. Let's say that you've got a house that you're renting for $1,200 a month. Well, they're only going to give you, about $3,000 to move into that house. But if that's a $200,000 house, that the payment's $1,200 a month, my buyers are going to give me $15,000 to $20,000 down. So it's a big difference in the mentality and in what they have to lose if they don't pay. Failure to plan, of course, you need to have a plan A and plan B. Even if seller financing is your choice, we always structure our deals where we could rent it, worst case scenario. If the market changed, like we're at right now, we're probably at peak market right now. If I take over the payments on a $200,000 house and the mortgage balance is $195 and the market tanks next week and this house isn't worth $200 anymore, it's only worth $170. Well, I'm underwater. But if market rent for that property is $1,200 and my payment is $800, I can still rent it and I'll be okay. So those things are really important. Another big problem, treating your investing as a hobby and not a business. You have to do things consistently and you have to go at it every single day. It's not something you can just do whenever you feel like it. If you call FSBOs, if your deal is to call 10 FSBOs a day, and that's what I tell my students to do, then that's what you have to do each and every day if you want to develop some traction and be able to make money in this business. And lack of proper education, like I said, you have to constantly be educating yourself. I mean, I've still joined groups and read on Facebook and hired coaches and teachers, and you've got to constantly be learning because things change every day. Laws change in states. You can't do things you used to be able to do and that sort of thing, and you've got to stay up on what's going on. Here's an example of a deal that we did. Our seller called us for magnetics on our car. If you're not using magnetics, I think you're missing a big opportunity. They're super cheap and people will see your signs and call you. Now, these guys, we talk about a typical motivated seller that has some type of distress. This guy had built a new home on the golf course and they had moved, but he was still making payments on this one. Making the payments wasn't really the problem for him. He didn't like having to go back over there and mow the grass and just do stuff. It just took up his time. And they just, they knew the house needed a little bit of updating. It needed new carpet. It had some older light fixtures in it, needed some fresh paint. Nothing very major. He just didn't have time to fool around with it and just didn't want to do it, basically. We went over and talked with him. We took over a $90,000 loan on this property. The property was probably worth around $150,000, had payments of $640 a month. We went in, put in new carpet, exchanged a few light fixtures to ceiling fans, put in a little fresh paint, and sold it on land contract for $159,000. Now, our buyer gave us $12,000 down. They paid us $1348 a month on that property. And just going over some of the details here, the marketing, hey, it was magnetics. It was very little negotiating to do with this guy. He just, the biggest part of negotiation, in my opinion, is just a conversation with the seller. Just start talking about the house. This house looks great. Why do you want to sell it? Listen to what they say. Like I said, this guy wasn't in any kind of distress. He had plenty of money. He was well-to-do. The house was just more a pain to him than anything else because it just sat there. He meant to go over and change carpet. He meant to get it painted. He meant to do stuff, but just time drug on, and the payment wasn't a problem for him. It was just inconvenient. Deal evaluation. Well, gee, when you can buy a house almost for a wholesale price, and of course our intent on everything is to sell or finance at this point. So, we took over his payments. We didn't have to do anything but come out of pocket for about $7,000 for some carpet, light fixtures, and paint. And marketing to sell, that's Facebook Marketplace. That's where we do most of our stuff today. And we've also got a buyer's list in most of the markets that we work in. So we're able to shoot out an email to however many people we've got on the list. So, hey, we've got a house on Tiffin Circle that's coming up soon. You might want to drive by and take a look at it and start collecting down payments. So what's the profit breakdown here? Well, we bought this house for $90,000. We paid $7,000 to do. I hesitate to even call it a rehab. Just paint carpet. Our note is $90,000 at 7%. This was an older note on the house, so the interest rate was a little bit higher. The payment was $640 a month. We sold it for $159,900 with seller financing. Our buyers gave us $12,000 down. Our buyer's note was for $147 at 10% with payments of $1398 a month. Now, on the surface, buying a house for $90,000, putting $7,000 in it, selling it for $159,000, it looks like there was about a $62,000 profit. But let's see how this thing will work out with seller financing in just a few years. Now, our profit on the front end was only $5,000. It wasn't anything tremendous because we had to put $7,000 of our own money in it. Our profit on our monthly cash flow, well, we calculate that to be around $63,000. $758 a month for 84 months. Now, we calculate that based on this. The typical person today lives in a house for about 7 years before they either refinance or move. So if we calculate this based on that average, that's where we calculate the cash flow. Now, these days, we like to get our sellers cashed out in 3 to 4 years. Does it always happen? No. And based on a particular buyer, we went with the 7-year plan because their credit's really bad. They don't seem to be real motivated to get new financing. So that's where we went with this. Calculating that in 7 years, our profit on the back end should be around $68,000. And that'll make the total profit on this particular deal over $137,000 over 7 years. And that's the difference that seller financing can make for you. Now, could we have retailed this house? Absolutely, we could have. And we could have probably, after realtor fees, closing costs, buyer's concessions, will probably have walked away with about $45,000 or $50,000. Is this a better scenario for us? You better believe it. And that's why we love seller financing. So some of the deals we're doing today, a simple cookie cutter model for financial freedom. Like I said, I came up with a little thing that I teach my students several years ago, and I call it 12 Houses to Freedom. And we're going to do a segment on that in the future. But this is a cookie cutter model that we're using right now. Now, our typical deal today, what we did was just average the average price. We try to stay in the less hot markets, most of them in the Midwest. But our typical deal that we do today is a $177,000 property that we'll buy for $159,000 plus or minus. Somewhere in that neighborhood. Right now, we're paying probably a little bit more because the market's just a little bit hotter. Our typical interest rate is 3.2%. And it's about 3 years into a 30-year amortization with payments running a little over $700 a month. Now, we'll take that $180,000 house and we'll sell it on a contract for deed for around $199,000, $194,000 to $199,000, somewhere in that neighborhood. We mark it up just a little bit. Top market value. Our typical buyer on that will give us around $20,000 down. We'll finance the balance at an average of 7.9% interest on a 40-year amortization. We amortize all of our seller finance deals on a 40-year amortization. And we do that for a couple of reasons. It's going to make their payment just a little bit lower, and it's going to make the back end payment that we get a lot higher. That spread in that interest rate makes a really big difference over a longer amortization. And before you think it's illegal to do that, or Dodd-Frank has terms against it, it does not. If you read Dodd-Frank, they don't mandate how many years you can amortize a loan for, so you're free to do it for as long as you want. Our buyer's payments are $1,232 a month. That gives us a little over $500 a month in cash flow, which is where we really like to be. And if these people stay in for 36 months, that'll be about $18,000. So when our buyer refinances in 36 months, our payoff is $22,000. And that's going to give us a total profit on these deals of around $61,000. And that's the number that I told you guys about a little bit earlier. I don't know if anybody's got any questions right now. I don't see any in the box. So we'll go ahead and move forward with the rest of the presentation. Okay, so here's a property that we did recently. This was on Centurion Place. We bought this house for $192,000. It was in an area where houses sell for around $215,000. We had a payment of $921 a month. We sold this house for $229,000 with $20,000 down and payments of $1,376, giving us a $455 a month cash flow. Now, if our buyer pays us for 36 months, our total profit on that deal will be over $62,000. Let me back up on that a little bit and tell you a little bit about this story. This is actually the last house that we bought using bandit signs. We stopped using them about this time. This bandit sign had been in this neighborhood for probably 6 months. And the lady, it was interesting. The story a lot of times is really fascinating on these deals. This lady said, she said, my husband and I saw your sign several occasions and used to comment on, I wonder how that works. How does that program work exactly? Well, it turns out she called us. Her husband had been killed in an auto accident a couple of months before, and she'd gotten quite an insurance settlement. They lived there. They didn't have any family there. She actually was from South Dakota, and she wanted to move back as soon as school was out. And she said, I really just don't want to deal with trying to show the house and trying to deal with agents. I really just want to get rid of it. They had bought the house several years earlier, and it had been recently refinanced because her husband had started his own business. So she said, I really just want to be done with this. I want to know that the house is just gone. So that's the reason. That was her motivation for selling. And so, and like I said, you think about it, A $1 bandit sign is what got us this deal. And we'll make, close to $63,000 off of it. It's a super nice house, just a few years old. And so, if you're not using bandit signs, get some of those out there today. This was from a 21-piece MLS mailing. We do mailings to what I call soon to expire listings in MLS, and they're not as prevalent as they were before COVID. But I think we bought this house early last year. By the time you filter, if you've got MLS access, and you should have as an investor, or find a way to get access. If you're not a licensed agent, then you need to find an agent to work with or become an assistant or somehow find access. But we filter MLS listings by days on market, and then we're looking for certain criteria. We're looking for houses with a price reduction. We're looking for houses that are vacant, ideally, and then we're looking for some kind of notes indicating motivation. That's the last one we look for, and it's the less often found, where it's pending foreclosure, seller motivated, bring all offers, must sell, or indicating some type of problem. But you'll find that from time to time. What you're looking for is a very small mailing list. This was a 21-piece mailing list. We sent this out. We bought this house for $172,000. We gave $10,000 to the seller. They left us a loan balance of $162,000. Now, these people were super motivated because the husband had been transferred. He had been living across the country for a few months, and they were just trying to sell the house and get it gone so the family could join them. That's why we paid them $10,000. We had payments of $880 on this. We sold it for $229, got a $20,000 down payment, cash flow of around $500 a month. And if our buyers stay for 36 months before we refinance them, then our total profit on this should be over $70,000. Now, the reason I throw out the 36-month thing, we started a few years ago using a credit repair service with our buyers. And what that does, we can take someone with any kind of credit score basically and get them finance ready within 36 months. Now, you will have to a lot of times stay on top of the situation, but what we do is just put the credit repair person in charge of that, and also the mortgage broker that handles our approval process. We do use a licensed mortgage broker to qualify our buyers. And I say qualify, I use that term pretty loosely. Our qualifications are that they have the down payment that required, that they have the minimum income for the monthly payment. But Dodd-Frank and the SAFE Act and those things do not really require that you use a mortgage broker. It just makes things easier. And it was a lot easier for me being remote. I couldn't sit there with all of my buyers and fill out paperwork and talk to them and that sort of thing. I also find that especially if you work remotely and you're not going to be shaking the hand of your seller or your buyer, the more licensed people that you work with in your business, whether that's your mortgage broker, your real estate agent, your closing attorney or title company, all of those people, the more of those people you have on your team, the more credibility it's just going to give you. When you're just a face on Zoom or a voice on the phone, if you've got these people doing your job for you in that location, it's just you just draw off of their credibility. They're all licensed, they're all trusted, and it just makes your job a lot easier. And we talk, those last couple of deals actually had some equity, and you will run into those. We actually had a call this morning with a student who just bought a house in North Carolina that is worth $210,000, and he bought it for $90,000, and it needs about $10,000 in work. Well, what was the motivation there? To give you a house for 50 cents on the dollar? Well, it was an inherited property. They really just didn't care. They lived somewhere else. They wanted to get it gone very quickly. And, he was just in the right place at the right times. Does it happen even in COVID, even in a super hot market? Absolutely it does. But more often than not, what you're going to find, and the deals that you're going to be able to buy relatively easy are going to be deals like this. Now, I call this no equity, no problem. But the truth, the way this house came about was in a market that we were working in. We've got people that do stuff for us, but we also had a driving app on their phone and said, listen, if you see a house that's apparently empty, that has a FSBO sign, whatever, snap a picture, send it to us. And the one we use is the REI Black Book app right now. At the time, we were using Deal Machine when we got this one, but this guy saw this house. He knew it was empty. It had snowed recently. It was obvious nobody lived there, and he took a picture and sent it to us. And so I called the seller, skip traced it, and called the seller. And the story here was they had bought this house a year before. And right after they bought the house, the husband got deployed. And so the wife decided to just live with her mother. She never, there was nothing in this house but a few boxes. They had never even really moved inside. And somehow over the last year, she had decided she wanted a divorce. So he wasn't coming back to the house. He didn't want it. She didn't want it. They hadn't taken any action to sell it. They had continued to make the mortgage payments because it was a VA loan. And most of you guys probably know that, you know, anybody in the service, if they default on a VA loan, it can make problems for them in their career. So they were open to, you know, just whatever we proposed. This house was worth about $120. It was in like new condition, and we bought it for the loan balance of $117. It had a 4.25% interest rate loan, and it was 1 year into the 30-year term. Our payments were $577. We sold it with seller financing. Again, we marked it up just a tiny bit. We marked it up $15,000. Our buyer gave us $10,000 down, and we financed the balance for 9% on a 40-year note. The buyer's payments were $964 a month. That gave us $387 a month in cash flow. And if those people stay 36 months, which that's our plan, our payoff will be about $13,000. That's what our back end profit will be. So literally on a no equity deal, we profited $10,000 up front. We'll profit $14,000 in cash flow and a $13,000 back end, giving us a $37,000 profit on a true no equity deal on a actually low price house. This is a deal that a coaching student did recently. In fact, we did a Facebook Live on it about a week ago. They just closed on this thing about 10 days ago. This is why we love seller financing. I'll tell you about this deal a little bit. This was actually a deal that my student got from a referral from a wholesaler that felt like they just couldn't do anything with it. The house was worth about $130, and the seller owed $82,000 and wanted $5,000 in cash, and the house needed about $4,000 and just some minor repairs. The wholesaler said it didn't fit his criteria, so he passed it along to my student, and so she went in, partnered with another student. There was some of the 79 that the seller owed, $20,000 were back payments to the lender. So they came in, took over the deal, and she said she had about a dozen people just waving money at her to buy it with seller financing. They're going to mark it up a little bit, sell it for about $135, and their total profit on this thing, we calculated that over the next 4 years, will be close to $100,000 on a $130,000 house. I mean, those are just incredible numbers. Now, you take this house in particular, they could have taken it on for the $79,000, put $5,000 to the seller, $4,000 in repairs, been into it for about $90,000 or a little more, listed it and sold it, and only cleared about $20,000 after their cost and everything. But by selling it with seller financing and carrying the note for a while, they'll make just a tremendous larger profit on the deal. So this is why we love seller financing. And while you'll love it too, 10 times the profits, it's just amazing. The difference in a house that you could take over the payments on, rent it, lease option it. You know, in a lot of states, lease option you're really limited on the amount of down payment that you can take or option consideration. Let's say on a $200,000 house in the state of Florida, you're limited to, I think it's 5% that you can charge an option consideration. So 10,000 will be the max you could get up front. With seller financing, you're not limited. You could get 10% down, which would be 20,000 or even more. Negative 10x on the hassles. You're not going to have anybody calling you about repairs or maintenance or any of those things that you need to do. You got the 3 profit centers that we talked about: the front end profit, the cash flow, and the back end when your seller pays you off. So always, whenever possible, we want to be the bank. Okay. So again, I just want to remind you guys, after today, we've got some free resources for you. You can check us out in our free Facebook group, the Sub2 Forum. We'd love to have you in there. We've got about 6,000 investors right now. We talk about Sub2 and owner finance and all creative finance every single day. You can visit our YouTube channel. Just look for Sub2 Deals on YouTube. We post a couple of videos every week answering questions and talking about creative finance. We've got our free podcast. We release a podcast every week at podcast.sub2deals.com, or you can check us out on Apple Podcast if you prefer. And then also our website. We've got a ton of articles and resources at sub2deals.com. So we're going to open this thing up to questions right now. If anybody's got any, I'll be glad to answer those for you. Like I said, I'm still getting sort of new to the Zoom webinar format. So if anybody's got anything they'd like to ask, I'll be glad to answer. Okay. Let's see. Okay, Linda, you have a house. Okay, how can I help? Okay. 3 units bought for $480. That's okay. Okay. So you bought it for $480. It's currently valued at $650 according to your realtor. Okay. My opinion on that, something like that in the current market that we're in, if you're relocating, are you moving out of the city or, out of the state? So you're going to be a long distance landlord out of state. Okay. If I were you, and that's just me personally, but I'm not a multi-unit type guy. Now I know anything 4 units or less isn't considered really multi-unit, but in the market that we're in right now, is this in the Atlanta market or somewhere else? Midwest. If you're, I would look at sales of those things right now. It's interesting. A lot of long-term buy and hold landlord type people, a lot of them that I know, and like I said, I've been in this business for about 21 years, are unloading their holdings right now because we're at the top of the market. If I were you, and I had something that I had, I don't know, 170, let's say, if you're at 480 and the market's 650, you're going to pay a realtor 35,000 to sell that place. So then you're still looking at over $100,000, $120,000 profit. I'd probably retail that thing personally, just because it's not single family. See, there's such a difference in single family. You might find someone that would want to live there and have those other 2, but single family and any kind of multifamily is just so much different for seller financing. If I were you, if it were me and I were in your position, I would sell it. I would just unload it and take that 120, 125 that I netted and go do some other stuff. That's me. but that's what I would do. Just because we're gosh, we're at the top of the market right now. And whew, I wouldn't sell or finance something like that because that's just not, it's not a single family home. I don't know how the numbers work out. Let's say that you wanted to sell it for top market value. You'd sell it for 650. Do you have any underlying financing on it? Yeah. Yeah, that, it would have to make sense for the buyer as an investor to live in one unit. You could sell it, but you could sell it and finance it. But yeah, if your loan balance is 487, yeah, I don't, what are those units rent for? I can't imagine them in the Midwest, a 3 unit. I can't imagine them renting for much over 1,000. Is that about right? Yeah. Gotcha. Yeah. If I were you and she's giving you a value and that would sell in a reasonable amount of time, 30, 60 days, I would sell it. I would. I would take that profit and go do some other stuff because especially if in your new market you focus on buying subject to, the only thing you're going to need money for in most cases is going to be for more initial marketing. And even if let's just say you encounter a situation where yeah, see, that's not going to be profitable for an investor type, and there's not many people that want to live in one unit of a 3 unit and have two tenants right there up under them. So what I would do, even if you go out and you buy subject to, let's say that it's a relatively low equity situation and you've got to give your buyer 10,000, your seller $10,000 to move, and it's a $200,000 house, you're going to collect 20,000 down from your buyer. So you're going to take 10 of that, give it to your seller. You're going to put the other 10 in your pocket. You're not going to need money to buy these houses. Gosh, even if you have to give the seller something, you're going to recoup that from your buyer. So I can't remember the last time I left money buried in a property. It just doesn't happen that often. So that would be, yeah, that's what I would do. I would sell it. I would take my 120 and go do something else. But that's just me. Okay. Good luck with that. Well, hey, listen, if you're not in the forum over there, the free forum, the free Facebook group, come join us. We talk about it every single day. Love to have you. Okay, so got another question. Yeah, just go to sub2forum.com. I just pointed it to a URL to make it easy. SUB2forum.com. As an investor, I'm considering selling my primary and rentals. Do you recommend direct selling by owner offering seller financing at top of market, wondering if full equity is better than holding for delayed reward? It really depends on what you want to do. Here's what I've found with most buyers of seller financing. If the payments still make sense, okay, remember, I told you we evaluate each property that we buy. Will plan B work? Will plan A, plan B? We've got to make sure that the rental amount, because this is what I find in most markets, even with high appreciation, that 1% rent rule is just not going to apply when you get to the more expensive properties. And I'm not sure what market you're in. But like, for example, I live in Colorado Springs now. I moved here last year, got married. My wife already had a rental house that she had, a 5-bedroom, 3-bath house. And in Colorado Springs, this house is probably worth close to $400,000 now, but we rent it for $1,700 a month. So you got to make sure the rental rate will make sense if your buyer bails. Let's say, for example, in the example I just gave you about this house, that I took this house subject to from somebody that had very little equity. It's worth almost $400,000, but it only rents for $1,700. That payment's got to be 12, 13, whatever, for it to make sense for me. So, but that's in a place where these things have appreciated so quickly. So, I mean, somebody may have the owner may have bought this house 5 years ago for $250,000, but now it's worth almost 400. So when they bought it, they were able to finance it and get a really good payment. As far as should you sell, if you're in a place where you can capture a lot of equity out of those properties, at this point in time, yeah, I would probably sell them direct. You can listen, I talk to people on Zillow every single day. You can list that thing and market value on Zillow and sell it pretty quickly. You don't even need an agent to do it. Most markets we go into, the bigger markets right now, a year and a half ago, I could go into, let's say, for example, Omaha, Nebraska, and type in my criteria and pull up 80 FSBOs that we're trying to sell. I go in there today, I'm lucky if there's a dozen. So these people are selling these houses as fast as they can on Zillow. So if I were you and I had several to do, I would probably liquidate them at top market right now and take that cash and do some stuff with it. But buying as an investment strategy, I'm out there looking every day for stuff that doesn't have much equity, and we'll take overpayments on that. Yep, sure thing. Okay, guys, doesn't look like we have a lot of questions today, so I hope this was helpful for y'all, and we'll be back next month. We'll probably talk about the 12 Houses to Freedom model. I will show you next month how you can take 12 houses a year and create an income that'll put you in the 1%ers club. It doesn't sound like it. Everybody's talking about thumping and grinding and working hard and buying 20 houses a month. You don't have to do it. You can buy one house a month and in 36 months, be making over $500,000 a year with subject to and seller financing. We'll talk about that next month. You guys have a great day. Go out there and talk to some sellers, buy some houses.